Good afternoon. Welcome to USJI seminars on the variety of Japanese long-term and last strategy is inheriting GPJ's policy. I'm Nakatsuji, the president of this USJI, US Japan Research Institute, and also the vice president of Waseda. USJI was established in March 2009 by 8 leading Japanese universities, namely Dosha, Keio, Kyoto, Kyushu, Ritsumeikan, Tokyo, Tsukuba, and Waseda universities. This USJI has been supported by the both US and Japanese business societies. The purpose of establishing this USJI is to promote, to encourage, and dispatch the policy-related issues on the issues of many important issues, mainly global issues, both US and Japan faced. And we have conducted the USJI week twice a year, in March and in September. And last Friday, the Prime Minister came to Washington, D.C. and have a summit meetings with President Obama. And also he had a speech. He gave a speech at the CSIS. The title of his speech was Japan is Back. And during his talk at the CSIS, he touched on many issues. But I understand the growth and reverse strategies of economies of Japan is the main one of the main issues. And today we are very fortunate to have 3 distinguished speakers on this topic. And before introducing the moderator so far, I would like to ask your permission to take your pictures for video recording. And so I would like to welcome the Professor Suzafa of Harvard University.
Thank you very much, President Uchida. I'm very delighted to be here. I'm a professor at Harvard, and it was my privilege to be here last week for Prime Minister Abe's visit and his talk at CSIS and the reception for him at the Crystal Room. So it seems, at the Willard Hotel, so it seems really a great opportunity to have this session this week to look at Abenomics and the strategy that he has rolled out and that the LDP has rolled out for Japanese growth and rebirth, our topic today. Now, it's a particular pleasure to be here because I've been long an admirer of the USJRI program since its formation, but this is really my first chance to come to any one of its seminars, so I'm very happy to be here on that score. And I'm grateful to Keiji Nakatsuji, the professor who will be our central presenter today from Ritsumeikan University, for inviting me to join his panel. Before we proceed, I do think we should point out that it's timely but maybe ironic to be talking about an economic plan in a country where we have been unable to produce one, and that we're now in today, as of today, in sequestration. And as a reminder for those of you who live in Washington, how obscure this word really is, the Boston Globe just did a survey, and it turns out a number of people in Boston believe that sequestration believes the state you enter when you become 70 years old. So this is, you're supposed to laugh. Just understand this. Okay, so and the situation in the U.S. government is so discouraging, and generally around governments today, that my husband and I thought we might kind of put ourselves in a better situation by traveling, but we decided to go to Italy, which has no government at all. What we will do today, we have first a presentation from Professor Nakatsuji, then we will have remarks from a very, very well-qualified discussant, Counselor Yokoyama, and then I will close with some final remarks. So let me introduce Professor Nakatsuji. He earned his PhD from the University of Chicago in 1985. His dissertation dealt at that time with the Straits in Crisis, American and long-term disposition of Taiwan. He became an assistant professor at Hiroshima University and later an associate professor. He moved to Ritz-Macon in 1998, and he has been a visiting professor at University of Malaya and also University of British Columbia, UBC. In 2006 and 2007, he was a visiting scholar, I'm happy to say, at Harvard University in the institute that I was then directing, the Reicher Institute of Japanese Studies. He has recently published a book about China's entry into WTO. Our second, therefore, he was our main speaker, and the first commentator will be Tadashi Yokoyama, who is the economic counselor for the Embassy of Japan here in Washington. He received his master's degree from Stotsubashi and a master's degree in addition from Warwick University and also a degree in regional and urban planning from LSE, also in the UK. He has quite a deep knowledge of Japan's economic policy from any number of positions he's held. He was with the Economic Planning Agency. He was then with Directorate General for Economic Research in the Cabinet Office of the Japanese government. He was seconded to the economics, the economics department of OECD from 2003 to 2007. He served in the Cabinet Office, again, on the Government of Japan as Directorate General for Economic and Fiscal Management, and most recently, he has then been in the embassy since 2012. He's published quite a number of papers on topics such as upgrading Japan's innovation system to sustain economic growth. In other words, topics directly related to what we're discussing today. A paper on getting the most out of public sector decentralization in Japan, and structural changes facing Japan. So he has been deeply, deeply immersed in economic reform issues. Let me turn things now over to Professor Nakatsuji.
Thank you very much, Professor Farr. It is a great honor for me to have the opportunity to speak in front of a very keen audience, as well as with Counselor Yokoyama. I have started talking with Susan about the research project called Can Japan Come Back? About a year ago, and meaning that we are still wondering whether Japan can possibly come back. But our Prime Minister already has said that Japan is back. And so the focus of discussion today will be about he is correct or not. Probably, of course, Prime Minister is at his position only for 2 months, and too early to tell what he can possibly will do and what is his exact vision of growth strategy or rebirth strategy of Japan. The topic, basically I intend to discuss about the state of governmental discussion over growth or rebirth strategy of Japan throughout my presentation. The questions, what I'm posing for my presentation is what is Abenomics, and will Abe continue Noda's rebirth strategy for Japan? The second question sounds a little funny because Noda represented the DPJ, the Democratic Party of Japan. Abe is from, of course, LDP, or Democratic Party. So they are opposing each other. So basically, there's no obligation for Abe to follow Noda's footsteps. But the reason what I'm posing this question is that if Noda's strategy has some wisdom for the sake of national interest of Japan or for the sake of Asia-Pacific region, why don't Abe the respect wisdom which Noda had extended? And so to compare Noda's idea with Abenomics has some reason, I thought. And lastly, I think I would like to do some prediction whether Abenomics will work positively or negatively. Of course, it is too early to tell, but at least it's worth concerned about that. Okay. I think I have already told what I'm going to talk, but basically, 4 things I'm going to discuss throughout this presentation. First, I will show a very rough picture of the state of Japanese economy, which Councillor Akiyama will talk with beautiful slides and more detailed information later on. But my focus of my discussion is policy debate, policy discussion, what kind of policy will Abe will take. And it began already being called Abenomics, and he has 3 main purposes, fields, which is called 3 hours in Japanese lately. And I will do some comparison, Abenomics with Noda's Rebirth strategy. And I would like to present some tentative conclusions. This table, I think you have been seeing quite many times already, so I don't think I need to explain in detail, but what this is showing is obviously very stagnant economic condition of Japan. At least last 3 quarters are concerned, 3 quarters of last year is concerned, Japanese GDP actually contracted. Throughout the last 20 years, from time to time, Japanese GDP actually decreased. And this is yen-US dollar exchange ratio. The trend is obvious that downward appreciation of yen, upward appreciation of yen has been a very stable trend the last few years. And of course, the recent trend is, of course, yen is becoming a little weaker, and it's working positively for Japanese trade. But yet, basically, yen has became stronger and stronger. That heightened, of course, Japanese economy. It's the export industry. Therefore, I think many of you remember how the Japanese were doing in terms of trade during 1970s and 80s. And we had a very serious economic friction with the United States over excessive export from Japan to the United States. But it's all gone story. And what we see now is that Japan experienced 87 billion deficit last year. And it is worse since 1979. 1979 means, of course, second energy crisis caused by Iran. And export became smaller, contracted, and especially export to China and Europe. Europe, I think I don't have to explain in detail about those facts. Like economic condition in Europe, of course, worked very negative for the export from Japan. And as far as industry-wise, and automobile and electric appliance damaged quite a bit. Import from Middle East, of course, it's crude oil. And among the entire export of Japan, 36.7% spent for purchasing crude oil fuels. So, because of great control, great total output, most of the Japanese nuclear power plants stopped. Therefore, Japan needed to import quite a bit of crude oil, and it has been costing quite a bit of money for the Japanese economy. And 3 hours of economics. Again, I think I have to explain in detail about those things, but you have been very much impressed about somewhat aggressive Abe's stimulating policy, making 2% inflation target, and almost forced the governor of Bank of Japan to resign, actually, because of the different economic policy, macro policy between two leaders. And of course, fiscal stimulating policy, which I'm going to discuss a little later, concerning supplementary budget, was very expansive, very aggressive as well. 14.5 trillion supplementary budget. Though it's only about 15% of the entire budget, still the biggest since Aso government administration. And last week, of course, growth strategy for the sake of longer goal, growth strategy will be most important part of economics. I will discuss all three a little more in detail through two complete the policies, supplementary budget, and of course I need to discuss a little about election manifesto of LDP for the last election, through which they won. They returned back to ruling party. One very clear character of supplementary budget is huge amount of money will be spent for public infrastructure, through which, of course, LDP kept power last 4 decades or so. And they started spending more money in public infrastructure, for the construction of public infrastructure, again, in the name of robust homeland. Of course, Japanese experienced fear of great earthquake, so entire homeland should be strengthened in terms of infrastructure and all those things. But that will, of course, pour huge amount of money to the general constructors, which have been a very strong supporter of LDP in the past. And second, I will discuss only a few striking characters of supplementary budget. Second is more in a sense constructive, more positive aspect. Energy conservation and renewable energy promotion. For the sake of that, they go, some money will be spent. And another very interesting point is tissue engineering. our member, one professor of our member university, Kyoto University, Professor Yamanaka won Nobel Prize through his invention of discovery of, or should I rather say invention, of induced very potent stem, IPS. And that could be a huge human innovation, and that could be a big industry, medical industry. So the economic possibility government is considering through promoting tissue engineering and support for small and medium enterprise and venture capital business support, and Crew Japan, Japan following footsteps of Britain, Crew Britannica, I don't know. Japan is emphasizing more contemporary cultural aspect through which that Japan can, of course, make some money, animation, manga, and of course tourism and Japanese foods and everything. And so as a whole, I can say the character of supplementary budget in general like this. The size of budget is quite large. It is, as I told you, stimulating purpose. It has a stimulating purpose of Japanese economy, but as far as contents are concerned, there are much of sufficient discussion how all those money should be spent very efficiently. And of course, it will increase governmental selling of governmental bonds, and already governmental debt is over 200% of GDP, which in the long run, which will be a very serious problem for Japan. And infrastructure part, public infrastructure construction part, really reminds some of oak barrel in the history of Japan. And there are some good aspects, as I told you, like IPS, but those are still the amount of money they are going to spend, government is going to spend, is still very small. As I have told you, that a supplementary budget will be only consist of only about 15% of the entire budget, so it won't tell much. But so that I should check campaign manifesto of Liberal Democratic Party a little bit, and all those lists that this is a list of major campaign contentions, the policies which LDP had extended. First, reduction of corporate tax. Currently, I think Japanese corporate tax is highest along with the United States, I think, among the major economies. So LDP is looking for a corporate-friendly nation to reduce below 30%, and abolish Japan unique regulations to have smooth economic activities. And the nuclear reactor policy, Abe is already started talking about resumption of nuclear reactor or reactivation of nuclear reactors, but that basically LDP has said that they will decide what to do in 3 years. And best energy mix discussed, and TPP, Prime Minister Abe has already mentioned his personal opinion that he'd like to join TPP if the United States have made some exceptions, like rice, unimported rice, and all those things. But as far as the manifesto is concerned, that the LDP's posture was very negative, actually. So obviously, Prime Minister will have time to win party consensus within his own party. And last one is, those who say, Japan, despite a small archipelago, we have 47 prefectures. So the duplication of local administration we see quite a lot. So the larger state system should be adapted. And that's LDP's idea. And last but not the least, the female leaders should be increased up to 30%. But I think many of you have noticed that all those manifesto, all those campaign goals are quite abstract, not very concrete. Then third part of my discussion, let me check about the reverse strategy of the administration. They had the cabinet, cabinet and Noda administration had approved reverse strategy last summer, and these are main points of that strategy. Three industries were emphasized for the future economy of Japan. First, life industry. Tissue engineering, which I have already discussed. So nobody didn't discuss about IPS, but tissue engineering has been already discussed. And in that aspect, Abe is following the DPJ's policy. And all those innovative medical and health-related initiatives were already extended by the Noda administration. And there's no reason we believe that Abe will not follow all those ideas. And agriculture is also very important industry. Japan's self-sufficient rate of foods below 40, around 40%, I think. So they want to make it 50%. And I think the average age of Japanese farmers are close to 65 or something like that. So that they really need young farmers. So industry should have a future, and that has been discussed by Japanese government, regardless of which ruling party which party is ruling. Sixth industry is a kind of funny word, but agriculture is basically considered first industry, primary, and not only farming, but also the government is intending to have more cooperation, agricultural cooperation, which will produce agricultural products, and also distribution part will be covered. So 1 + 2 + 3, sixth industry. That's what they. And of course, the Japanese agricultural products are very expensive, but quality is really good. So to enhance such image more, traceability, who cultivated, who actually produce all those agricultural products will be the exposed, will be transparent. And because of the quality, especially to China, it may be possible for Japan to export rice and everything to Asia. Green strategy, this is another very important field. Smart community means that I think many of you, I don't have to explain quite a bit, smart grid and energy efficient community will be initiated, and I think, and Japan is already very strong at hybrid, a new generation eco-friendly cars, and aggressive government is intending to win 50% of global all those energy market, including infrastructure. And through Japan, I discussed a little bit compact city. Compact cities, Japanese are aging, and especially local communities. And the older infrastructure is not really convenient for elderly, so that local cities should become smaller and more efficient. That's what the Japanese government is intending, was intended to produce. Okay, and all those notice policy so far has not been denied by Abe, and he hasn't discussed it at all. So maybe my guess is quietly he will take wisdom of Noda administration or strategy. I will show two scenarios: a good scenario and a bad scenario. Best scenario and worst scenario. If everything went well, I think structural change will take place, and three industries which I have discussed, flourishing new industry might bring the comeback of Japan, and the more female and elder, especially in labor force. Because of nature of nationalistic nature of Abe, he hasn't discussed, or LDP hasn't discussed much about the foreign workers, foreign immigration. And third, Japan really need to integrate into the rapidly growing Asia-Pacific economies, so that Japan can revitalize, stimulate our economy. And I have already discussed about rural Japan, revitalization of rural Japan will be very important. But so far, he's been in post only for 2 months, so it's too early to discuss. But as I have told you, that how Abe will, for example, make more female leaders, or more elderly participation in labor force has not been discussed very completely. So this is just one example. Many all those statements are still very unclear. So I'm not the person very optimistic, but rather there's even possibility that all those policies will not work very well. For example, construction of infrastructure, public infrastructure, might come back of politics, and there's no reason for us to believe that Abe will win consensus among LDP leaders, among LDP politicians concerning TPP, if not many exceptions are made. So one possibility is that LDP will return back to the same old pro-rural, big business policy. And the reason why what the LDP and Abe has been Abenomics has some commonalities with Noda's policy is all those policies are basically constructed, crafted by bureaucrats. So there's continuity of strength of bureaucracy despite the power shift. So that might become stronger. So what the worst scenario is that Japan is going back to 60s and 70s in terms of political or administrative structure is concerned, and which may not work very well from now on, as far as Japan's economic comeback is concerned. Iron Triangle is a kind of cooperatism among political leaders and bureaucrats and business. And that might move Japan again, and the vested interest will preserve all Japan. And as a whole, that Japan is aging, so continuation of stagnant aging Japan might continue. So it is our first story to tell that whether Abe will actually bring to good scenario, best scenario, or worst scenario. We need to wait and see. But again, there's no reason to be very optimistic about that. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much. And for those of you who came in a little bit late, that was Professor Nakatsuji of Ritsumeikan University. And then we'll have our first discussant, Tadashi Yokoyama.
Thank you very much, and it's my honor to be invited here and also speak with distinguished professors, Dr. Nakatsuji. Thank you very much for Nakatsuji Sensei's insightful presentation of the solutions for Japan and Japanese government. What I'm going to do today is to show some slides to provide you with some basic information on the so-called Abenomics, as well as background information of the Japanese economy for your reference to facilitate later discussions. This is a sort of official chart to explain so-called Abenomics. As Nakatsuji Sensei already explained to you, the new government's economic policy is formulated under the three-pronged strategy. Well, the more direct translation is, of course, the three arms strategy of bold monetary policy, flexible fiscal policy, and a growth strategy that promotes private sector investment. The first action was the formulation of an economic stimulus package on January 11th. Its fiscal size, as well as expected economic impact, is around 2% of GDP. This was followed by the announcement of a joint statement on overcoming deflation by the government and the Bank of Japan. The Bank of Japan committed to achieve a 2% price stability target at the earliest possible timing. The third pillar, a new growth strategy that would encourage private sector investment, is being discussed actually by several key government economic councils and will be announced by the middle of this year. helped by the policy efforts and gradual recovery of the global economy, the government projects that the real GDP growth rate for fiscal year 2013, which starts in April this year, will be around 2.5%. So now I'm going to explain some background about the economic situation in Japan, as well as some policy implications. This slide shows recent economic developments. As you see, Japan was hit by 3 negative shocks in recent years. The global financial crisis, then the global East Japan earthquake, and the most recently the sharp slowdown in exports due to excessive appreciation of the yen and the global economic slowdown. Indeed, the Japanese economy has recorded 3 consecutive quarters of negative growth. The stimulus package aimed at avoiding the economy to fall into a negative spiral. This slide shows that Japan has been under deflation for more than a decade now. This one is a GDP growth rate since the 1960s. Japan's real GDP growth rate has decelerated sharply from over 10% in the 60s to 5%, 3%, 2%, then almost 0 during the 2000s. Not only the overall GDP, but also per capita GDP has been lagging behind other advanced countries, as indicated on this chart. Demographic factors played important roles behind economic slowdown, as you will see a sharp decline in the working age population since the 1960s. It is expected to keep shrinking at 1 to 2% annual rate for many more decades. As a result, the proportion of elderly people increased at a historical pace. It is now almost 40%. It's about here. One thing I would like to note here is that many countries will reach a similar degree of aging in the coming decades and may face similar problems that Japan is facing today. Aging has fiscal implications, including a rise in social spending. Japan's public social spending was traditionally smaller than many other countries, but it has been increasing in recent years, particularly in recent years, by pensions and healthcare related expenditure, and has reached around the OECD average. Despite such an increase in social spending, the total government expenditure of Japan is relatively small among OECD countries. This implies that it is probably more challenging for Japan to find room to cut its spending. Meanwhile, the revenue to GDP ratio in Japan is one of the smallest among OECD countries. This tax sounds nice, but the result is the run-up in public debt. As you see, the size of the gross public debt is now over 200% of GDP. The Japanese government plans to raise the consumption tax rate from 5% to 10% in the coming years. So given our critical fiscal situation, fiscal stimulus can be and should be used only as a temporary measure to support the economy. In order to maintain and raise the living standard in the long run, Japan needs to boost its growth potential by either increasing labor inputs or raising productivity. One way to boost labor force input would be to raise labor participation rate particularly that of women, as many female workers quit jobs after they have their baby. As for raising productivity, reform in product markets, labor market, and greater integration with the rest of the world would be the major ways to achieve that. This slide shows progress in regulatory reforms, and it's an international comparison of the regulatory reform created by the OECD. And Japan seems to have done so in the past several decades, according to this index. If Japan should aim to become the world's most business-friendly place, which is one of the government's policy goals, then Japan should probably accelerate regulatory reform further. And reform of the labor market is also important, as it has become very much polarized between the better protected regular workers with traditional lifetime employment system and the seniority wage system, and less protected non-regular workers who can take little training. There are actually many more structural issues, but I do not have the time to go through one by one today. So, what is currently discussed in Tokyo? According to the Prime Minister's direction on January 25th, a wide range of issues have been put on the table. I think many of these items will contribute to the raising labor force participation or increasing productivity. My concern is that if the agenda becomes too comprehensive, it will probably not change the situation very much. In fact, the growth strategy of the previous government, which Nakatsuji mentioned, is this one, very thick. And, some people, many people, think it's a sort of form book, including all the detailed policies. And there was actually an old version published in 2009. And I am not sure what extent these two strategies are duplicated, and to what extent they have been actually been implemented. So I personally do not mind to see a new growth strategy, which includes only a very limited number of measures, but each of them will have a real impact on the economy. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Councillor Yokiyama. For those of you who missed the introductions, I'm Susan Farr at Harvard University, and I'm very honored to be part of this panel. I think this panel really is a very useful one, particularly coming on the heels of the visit of the Prime Minister last Friday, to get past the buzz that comes with any Prime Ministerial visit and really ask the hard questions of sort of where we go from here. My own perspective as a political scientist is that, of course, there is a government report and a series rollout of a growth and rebirth strategy plan. But from there, the challenge for this very thick document is the challenge for a political leader, for Abe and for his party, is to figure out what to pull out of that agenda and package in a way that can be taken to the Japanese public and win support for it. And that occurs in a political context. And I think we should just look a moment at this political context, because I think it's really quite central for evaluating what's happened so far and also for helping us think about what's to happen from now. And my own take is that Mr. Abe and the LDP actually deserve a lot of credit for what they have managed to do in, we talk in the US about the first 100 days, well really around 80 days. There have been a lot of steps taken. And when you think about the context, only 4 years ago, the Democratic Party of Japan was on top of the world. It had swept into victory in August of 2009, with the LDP being utterly trumped in an election. This was a stunning defeat for the LDP. And it was a commentary on how much, not so much that the voters liked the DPJ, but that they had so many misgivings about the LDP and blamed the LDP, Liberal Democratic Party, for failing to deliver on turning around the economy and all kinds of other economic reforms that they felt had not gone through because of opposition within the Liberal Democratic Party. And there was also much ineptness for which the LDP was blamed, such as the loss of the 50 million pension accounts, if you remember that episode that actually occurred during Mr. Abe's first term when he was Prime Minister. So, despite this beating that the LDP took, 4 years later, we are in an entirely different place. And the LDP has managed to come back and in fact has achieved one of the greatest electoral victories of any political party in the post-war period in Japan. And this is an extraordinary story because going into the election, the LDP had only 25% of the seats in the, more important, lower house of the legislature. They came out of that election with 61% of the seats, an astonishing gain into a comfortable majority. And meanwhile, the DPJ, which had risen so high only 4 years before, went from 64% of the seats down to under 12%. So this enormous shift, changing fortunes occurred. And this was achieved despite the fact that surveys show that voters still have misgivings about the LDP. So that's the context in which Prime Minister Abe has found himself. It was very interesting. I was in Tokyo in January interviewing mid-career professionals, Japanese mid-career professionals around average age around 37, and I asked him this question: which prime minister since Koizumi, meaning since 2006, and there have been 6 prime ministers until Abe, through those years, which of these 6 did you like the best? Generally speaking, there was a silence and not many people liked that question, but the answer was completely uniform. All of them liked Mr. Noda better than any of the others, and he was from the DPJ, and these were people who presumably just voted for the LDP. So it shows the kind of confusion that's going on, and I heard many people say that they thought the best administration would be an LDP administration, but with Mr. Noda as Prime Minister. So voters are very volatile today, but also it shows that Mr. Abe has faced an uphill situation in terms of questions about him and what he will be like as a Prime Minister. And the LDP is faced with proving itself rather quickly to voters that they can get the job done, whereas the DPJ lost over the last 4 years because they showed that they were not able to get the job done. In light of that, I think we have to give Mr. Abe some real points here over these last 80 days or so for moving ahead on this economic plan. So let me just mention 5 things that I think are success stories for Mr. Abe on the economic front. The first was that he managed to take this thick document and pull out something that was comprehensible to voters, his notion of the 3 arrows, a kind of integrated economic plan, and he moved very quickly to get it out there. In a series of presentations, everyone knew about the arrows, and in fact, on the strength of this, his popularity rating went up to 71%, which was a real achievement. And the second point is that in his package, he had some measures that people could quickly see results on. One is that monetary easing and other policies made possible the depreciation of the yen, and people could see pretty soon, by golly, the yen depreciated around 15%. So this is something, a result that people can point to. The third point is that the Abe administration so far has shown some real skill in getting what we say its ducks lined up, meaning that as Prime Minister Abe, has rolled out his economic policies, appropriate sounds have been made by the G20 and Russia, by the US government, that this package makes sense, and in fact, even letting the yen depreciate is acceptable to Japan's allies. Many times, in contrast, over the last 4 years under the DPJ, the signals got mixed and the work behind stage had not been done, and this kind of credible sign-off didn't occur. The fourth point is on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. This issue came up faster than Mr. Abe had hoped, because there's, in his own constituency, among farmers and others, there's resistance to seeing Japan get on board with the TPP. And the LDP, going into the election, had taken the position that it would not join unless it had some real reassurances that prior concessions would not be required as a condition of joining. So he had staked out, Abe, as president of the LDP, had staked out a position going into the election that showed a reluctance on the set conditions for Japan joining TPP. Prime Minister Abe came away from Washington last week with the kinds of assurances he needed to pave the way for Japan joining the TPP. And in terms of moving an economic agenda forward, this will set in motion a process of reform, presuming pressures for reforms in Japan that will be positive. The fifth point, many of you may have mixed feelings about, but yesterday in the Diet, or Thursday in the Diet, the Prime Minister took the position, or staked out, announced really, that the nuclear reactors that were shut down because of Fukushima, the tragedy there, and there were 54 originally, 50 operative, 2 restored now, so 48 or so we're talking about. He's saying that they will go back online. Now, this was not a surprise to voters because this was a position of the LDP going into the election. It's really too early to tell if, in terms of packaging his agenda, he's come out too early on this, because this is one of the most sensitive of all issues in Japan. However, I think there is a view, from having looked at the issue of costing for various kinds of energy mixes that Japan could elect, that if nuclear energy is not in that package, the cost of energy is just extraordinary. And it's in that name that a process has been put in motion to put some of the nuclear power plants online as soon as they meet quite strict standards from a newly appointed nuclear regulatory agency. This is controversial, but give him credit. This was bold to come out front right now and take on this very controversial issue and put it before the voters. So all of these, I think, actually are, we have to give Prime Minister Abe credit for doing this. Are there misgivings that I have? There are, obviously. What government in the world today we don't have misgivings about, because it's very difficult these days for governments. The first is exactly the kind of misgivings that Professor Nakatsuji has talked about today. In a way, with the LDP's strength now in the lower house, and after the summer election is expected to gain seats in the upper house, and it is going to have actually quite a bit of capacity to make changes. The issue is going to be whether it has the will to make changes. And now we're talking about the changes further down the line of the kind that Professor Nakatsuji talked about, to take on interests within his own party that have blocked reform in the past. And on some of these, the signals on some of these issues are fairly weak. For example, saying that women, 30% of leadership positions in the future should go to women. Well, there were only 2 women appointed to the cabinet. And you know, this is not a sign of quick follow-up on that agenda item. And generally speaking, there will be a huge amount of work ahead, and the issue is whether the LDP will take it on. And then finally, the issue is that, as we all know, Prime Minister Abe has an agenda that is a political agenda that has in the past gotten him in trouble. And so the recent article by Gerald Curtis in Foreign Affairs says that he thinks that we will not see a hawkish Prime Minister because it will be not in his interest to take on those positions in the name of trying to get the LDP and to be effective as a Prime Minister and have things work. But I think it remains to be seen, given Mr. Abe's commitments, as to how well he will be able to bring that in. So I'll stop there. And what we would like to do now is to invite your questions. And may I ask you, when you direct a question to a speaker, why don't you indicate who you would like to direct the question to, and would you identify yourself so we can get to know you? So let me open it up. Careful, I'll soon ask myself a question. Well, while you're thinking about it, let me ask this to our...
I've got a question.
I'll take one.
Okay.
I have a question. My name is Mike Lillick, and I'll direct it to Councilor Yokoyama. One of the points that you had here was about encouraging greater...
They're recording the question. You may need to go.
Oh, okay.
Can you mention your position?
Actually, I'm here as a general, somebody with an interest in Japanophile, if you will. And I've watched Japan for many, many years, and I'm stunned at the way things have developed. But my question for Councilor Yokoyama has to do with, you mentioned encouraging greater participation of youth and women. And I'm wondering if there's anything in the policy, nothing was mentioned, about really encouraging the generation of more youth, which is to say, you know, the rate of births in Japan to get it back to more at a replacement level, and what impact that might have in the longer term on the Japanese side. Thank you.
Just to raise the fertility rate.
That's right, the fertility rate.
The participation rate.
Yes.
I think he asked you.
Yes. Well, currently the Japanese birth rate is around 1.4, if my memory is correct. But, still well below the so-called birth rate of 2.1, and much lower than other advanced countries. But I'm not sure if there is in this world any measures to politically raise the fertility rate. But because declining birth rate is a sort of universal phenomenon, as we observe in many other countries and many of the advanced countries. And I see that the fertility rate in United States and France, for example, are much higher than that of Japan. But the fertility rate has been boosted by immigrants in those countries. So in that sense, it's not probably easy to raise fertility rate by using policy measures. But the one thing I can mention about this is that it's not only birth rate but also related with the participation rate of women. Is that there is a lack of child care facilities in Japan, and many women quit work because they can't find a place to send their children during daytime. So that if there is a sufficient provision of child care facilities, then that would encourage women labor participation and may contribute to higher birth rate in the future.
No, not really. I think Councilor Yokoyama has mentioned what I wanted to say, and all those concrete policy, for example, construction nurseries and all those things, in a concrete manner should be put out as a policy by the administration. If he's talking about the female leadership, increase of female leadership by up to 30%.
Yes.
Stanley Coburn. There's a story about Harry Truman that he once said what he needed was a one-handed economist. because the economists would always go on the one hand and on the other hand. On the one hand, you can understand the need for stimulus. But on the other hand, you have the problem of Japan's debt, and that was mentioned, the debt to GDP ratio. A more interesting figure, to my mind, is the amount of tax revenue that goes to service the public debt. It's now about, as I understand, 50% of the tax revenue. About 25% simply goes for interest payments, and that's with very low interest payments right now. So that raises the question of the other hand. If Prime Minister Abe succeeds with the inflation, then the interest payments go up. I've seen they go up, estimates to 75% of tax revenue, which means there's really nothing left for the government to function. So this brings in Harry Truman's question, can you do this without being too one-handed? On the one hand, but on the other hand, is this a resolvable dilemma?
Yes, well, thank you very much for a very good question, which probably includes various issues. And as I said, this recent stimulus package was necessary in order to avoid Japanese economy falling into a negative spiral. In that sense, I think many officials and economists in the United States also agree with the introduction of the fiscal stimulus at this point. But at the same time, we need to think about the serious fiscal situation in Japan, and in that point, you are totally right. And, but fortunately, the debt service payment has been very low in Japan, helped by the very long-term interest rate. And that long-term long-term interest rate has been maintained by strong home buyers to Japanese investors, and those investors include large institutions like post office and insurance companies and so on. And they keep buying Japanese government bonds. And also Bank of Japan's monetary policy also helped the rise in the long-term interest rate. So all in all, Japanese government's interest payment has been kept very low. But there is a risk that the interest rate would go up at some point in the future, so we need to avoid that. Then what's important is that if the economy recovers and the interest rate goes up along with the economic growth, that is fine, because not only interest payment but also interest receipts and tax revenue increase. But if the so-called risk premium on public debt increases, then that's a problem. So we need to avoid that. And in order to avoid a jump in the risk premium, we should have a credible medium to long-term fiscal strategy and fiscal plan towards achieving fiscal sustainability. That's the point, I think.
Yes?
Thank you very much for the very informative presentation. My name is Hiro Kawauchi as a World Bank. My question goes to Professor Nakatsuji and Councillor Yokoyama. Both of you mentioned the aging issues, and Councillor Yokoyama also mentioned our public debt is 200% of GDP, and there are, of course, very serious problems. But at the same time, I want to point out that in the private sector, the household in Japan owns the financial asset of almost 300% of GDP, and around 70% of them are owned by the elderly people. That is a fact. So I think it is key to mobilize this very big portion of the financial asset to reverse or revitalize the Japanese economy. So how do you think that the private financial asset issues will or should be incorporated in the future growth strategy under the Prime Minister Abe? Thank you.
I think that's a very good question and not easy to answer. And one of the steps that the government has lately took is increase of inheritance tax. And it is important to narrow the gap between generation. I think elder generation do possess asset, yet as far as consumption aspect is concerned, that they are basically satisfied. They don't want to have any new house or new cars, anything, while the younger generation really would like to add all those things. So how we can move money to a younger generation to have a more positive consumption practice in Japan. That's the key, and that's what we started talking. And I need to apologize that I can't come up with much of concrete ideas, but maybe
I was hoping to hear great suggestions from but I ask Kaoshi-san's opinion. I don't know, because my personal impression is that this saving behavior is determined by the behavior of the elderly people. That they want to accumulate as much asset as possible in their life. And at the point, the final point, they request that to the later generations. But we need to change that because it's crucially important to mobilize this financial asset. And actually, this financial asset probably usually saved in banks, under banks, by lots of public government bonds, so that they feed into this government borrowing mechanism. So we need to reform all these at the same time. But I don't know. Yeah, the government has been trying to change the situation by changing the tax system to encourage elderly people to give to younger generations at the earlier timing, but I don't know actually. If the audience has great proposals, then I'll pass that to my colleagues in Tokyo.
Okay, next question. Then I have one. Go ahead. Just tilt it towards you, why don't you?
Thank you. My name is Jean Nguyen with Voice of Vietnamese Americans. I have two questions. One question emphasized on the energy and the agriculture, but before that, I'd like to come back to the recent question regarding the 200% debt of the GDP. That I did hear Dr. Richard Koo talk about this in 2010 at Brookings, and he specifically mentioned that the failure of the Japanese economy was due to the fact they paid too much concern on the balance of the sheet instead of giving the stimulus package to stimulate the growth of the economy. So I congratulate Prime Minister Abe for his stimulus package and not over concerned about the debt at this time, because stimulus is the right choice. We've seen that happen here in the US for the last 2 years. So coming back to my questions regarding the growth of Japan, one of the pillars that Prime Minister Abe emphasized is the growth rate. And to that, the energy is a big factor. And I'd like to ask if he and Japan has planned to embrace the potential energy productivity of the whole region Asia Pacific, including Southeast Asia, and especially with Vietnam? And the second question regarding agriculture also has to do with the TPP. If this is the opportunity for Japan to step in to the TPP and see that instead of protecting its market share inside a small island of Japan, to open its market to Vietnam, to Southeast Asia, to the Mekong River, to Chile, to Brazil, to Mexico, to Canada, to the US, open an agriculture market with the TPP and utilize the laborers, the young labor, youthful laborers, like in Vietnam, we have 65% young, under 30 years old laborers force in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could keep your answers brief so we can be sure.
I don't know where to start, but the one thing government has been emphasizing is exporting of infrastructure for energy purpose, and that will be a huge benefit for both Japan and the Asian countries, and that has, I think, best possibility. And the TPP, as I have told you that most farmers in Japan are over 65, and the younger generation do not very keen to be agricultural business. That's the biggest question. And so labor force will be a very important question, as well as quality of products, as well as farming, the size of farming lands and all those things. So what we really need to discuss about is possibility of immigrants, which is actually a very politically difficult question. But at least at academic level or the public discussion, we should start discussing about that.
Well, I'm not an energy expert, but I think there are a number of programs between Japan and Asian countries on the energy cooperation issues, and if you could give me a contact, I can introduce our energy experts and provide more information about this. Sorry. And for TPP, well, generally speaking, closer integration of the Japanese economy with the rest of the world is good, including boosting Japan's growth potential. And TPP is, of course, one option. And yes, there is a sensitivity in some sectors, including in Japanese agriculture, but Japanese government is trying to make it more competitive, so that maybe there are negative impacts on Japanese agriculture, but also the Japanese agriculture will be able to find a new market in other countries in the future. For example, my hometown produces a lot of Japanese pear, and which is now very popular is exported to other countries. I hear that it's very popular. So that yes, this kind of mutual flow, increased flow goods and services is good for the development of Japanese economy as well as the global economy.
Thank you. I have a question. If I think about both of your presentations and also your reference to quite a long document that is this growth plan, I didn't hear mention of the sort of need for globalizing Japan's workforce. There is, as we know, a huge debate underway in Japan about everything from changing the academic calendar to even having, for example, using the TOEFL exam for the entrance exams to the university. Japan's performance on the TOEFL examination is now one of the lowest in all of Asia. And clearly, from the standpoint of the service sector, for example, in the future, but more generally in the workforce, this is quite essential. And yet it doesn't seem to be part of the economic growth and rebirth plan. And I'm wondering why that is. It seems to be bracketed as education rather than integrated into the sort of master plan for the Japanese economy.
Well, the Ritsumeikan University, which I belong, has established what we call Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, having students are non-Japanese students. And we started having, of course, graduating students. They went into Japanese multinational corporations, and multinational corporations, because of that character, multinational character, they really need non-Japanese, internationally active workers. So as far as certain area, field of Japan is concerned, it is internationalizing. And then, along with Waseda, probably Ritsumeikan is considered one of the most internationalized universities. Yet, we have very strong abstraction within university, even increasing the international faculty members. And that has somewhat, I don't want to escape the history, but because of somewhat isolated history of Japan, that Japanese are not really good at internationalizing our society, but obviously we really should be headed toward that direction.
Did you want to comment on what's not in the plan, integral to the growth and rebirth strategy? That is the educational component, globalizing the Japanese workforce, particularly services, to make it more able to deal internationally. It's not considered.
I think if we wait for politicians, that kind of discussion will not take place at the, for example, LDP is not ready to provide right to vote for non-Japanese residents, even talking about local election, municipal level elections. So I think academia like us should start such discussion to induce public debate all the time.
Yes. Of course, I'm also thinking about Japanese students themselves, increasing their English capability and also their experience abroad. As we know, the numbers have gone down.
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid we are almost at it. Do you want to add to that on why that's not included in the growth and rebirth plan, the idea of trying to educate the Japanese workforce to equip it better to deal with the global economy?
Well, I think the government has introduced a number of measures and policies to facilitate globalization of the universities and cooperation between domestic and foreign universities. But I just learned that there is a cultural position of academics. But also there are, the government has introduced some years ago, almost 10 years ago, a special unique program called Special Zones Initiative, under which some regions can contribute to their own regulations, different from national regulation. And some regions introduced their own style of education, allowing more classes to go in English or whatever. Universities which are more open to foreigners and so on. So yeah, there are a number of measures going on, but there are probably cultural difficulties and so yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think we're almost at the end of our time, so may I thank all of you for your patience and your questions. And I'd like to thank our panelists and thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to be together today.